It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media, business, industrial, global complex. How you doing today, Steve?
I am fine. I'm learning to hate Microsoft Windows. I have now down to my cell phone here today, so forgive the bad audio, but I have one computer that's trying to update and won't stop, and now I think Windows has ruined it, and the other one doesn't seem to like my microphone, so it's just a never-ending battle of stupid technology.
Yes. We are all enslaved.
I keep telling these IT nerds, I want to turn off all Windows updates. I don't want it to ever update anything because it ruined one of my other laptops too. And, you know, they freak out, of course, and say, oh my God, you need these updates. And I just keep saying, no, I don't. I do not. How do I do this? And it won't let you. It won't let you just turn them off totally.
Well, I won't comment about how my Apple handles telling me if and when and how I want to update. And two, for the nerds out there, hit Steve up to tell him to give him an education on the Linux open source operating system.
See, I've heard the name. Chris mentioned this before the show, and I've heard the name, but I don't know what it is or how to do it or anything.
It's basically a open source free software version of Windows that you can, if you boot your computer correctly in like boot mode, you can install the kernel and then you can boot from that operating system. And then it's just it's not Windows, it's not Apple OS, it's a third thing.
Yeah, well, if there's somebody out there who legitimately understands this, do hit me up. Because if I can get away from Windows, that would be great, but I don't want to lose what's on my laptop either, which may already be gone because this Windows thing is not working, actually. But
well, so yes, we need let's crowdsource getting Steve some IT help with alternative operating systems. Now for a subject that we all wish we had alternative operating systems about, and that is what I've just start calling SnyderWorld, because it really is so all-encompassing. I don't even know. I mean, there's so many ways into this bi-weekly update, but I guess maybe the most newsy part, I don't know, I guess we could debate that even, is that he has gracefully declined to come to sit before the Congressional Committee. But it looks like the trend might be the opposite, at least with a video appearance by one Roger Goodell. So some more intrigue on the congressional investigation front and what Dan will do.
Okay, so allow me to give some insight into this. I am not a full-time litigator. However, I have litigated and at times in the past. And one cardinal rule of this is to never, ever make your client testify if he doesn't have to in a case in which he or she, in this case he, is the subject of the investigation, right? So Dan Snyder was never going to do this ever, nor should he. I mean, I wouldn't let him either. This is the problem. It's like Roger Goodell isn't the one under investigation here. It's definitely Snyder. Snyder's lawyers told him it's a really horrible idea to go under oath in front of Congress. And Dan's probably not that good at testifying. He probably hasn't done it that much. As a CEO, there's probably an apex deposition theory. So I bet you he doesn't testify much. So I think it would be really stupid for him to do that. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree from that point of view. I mean, I can understand why they're not doing it 100%. And I can imagine his lawyers saying that. I think what to me is, and, I never expected him to. So this idea that it was a shock that he isn't, there's no surprise there. This is what, I figured what would happen. I would consider status quo. The interesting part to me is Roger and what he does. And so, let's assume he shows up and, video I would count as showing up. Is he going to take the bullets? Is he going to be the protector of the 32? Is he basically a de facto representative of Dan Snyder? Or are we going to see a continued rift? I think he probably is going to be there as a shield. The shield. But, it will be interesting. And it is, I think, the most newsworthy part if he shows and Dan doesn't.
Well, I mean, Roger's entire job basically is to be the shield. So he will be a shield. Just the question is, will he be a shield for the Redskins and for Dan Snyder? Right. That's another question.
That's what I meant.
But yeah. I don't know. That's I mean, to me, if he throws Snyder under the bus, that means Snyder's got to go. I mean, seriously, I don't know where else to go with it. If he goes to Congress and says basically, there was misconduct and Snyder did it and he's an awful person. I mean, he's not going to say it like that, but even if he indirectly allowed those words to be put into his mouth, I just think it's probably over for Snyder. I mean, how could he have any credibility or any respect amongst the league at all if that happens? Now, as I said before, this is a committee that shouldn't be doing anything. I mean, it's a gross misappropriation of congressional resources for Congress to be investigating one private, closely held corporation. It's not Congress's job. It's not Congress's business. They shouldn't be doing anything. But since they are, here's where, this is where we are. But whether he does it or not, I don't know. I just think if he does, it's over. That's what I think.
I think it'll be, I mean, Goodell will be masterfully political, right? Because, of course, that is his job, essentially. That's why he gets $60 million. So what'll be interesting is where, because we've talked about, and I think what is ultimately going on here is, how long does the calculus in the NFL offices go to keeping this guy is safer for the league or ditching this guy, right? And there's a whole spectrum of factors and yada yadas, but eventually, we're all looking at this red meter that could bounce either way. And so it will be really interesting as a weather vane type of thing. And you might have to really parse, right? He's not going to come out and bash him, but it'll be real, even some of his framing language, even if Roger starts to tiptoe away from Snyder in any way, it will be a moment to sort of gauge where the league's at.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. Maybe you said it better than I did. He's not going to come out and just go, Dan Snyder is a misogynist and he sucks. And, he's not going to say that. Roger is very skilled politically and all that. But the point would be, as you said, does he kind of indirectly back away from him? And that's what I just don't know. I tend to think not. Because number one, a lot of these owners have these same problems, remember. A lot of them are sleazeballs, but they just don't get caught. Dan's stupid enough to get caught. So if you had to make me guess, because that's, I guess, our job here, our fake job, I would say that Roger does his very best to not even indirectly go to that and instead say something along the lines of, we're investigating it, and to the extent something needs to happen, we'll do it. I think that's probably all we'll hear from him.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case too. And even though this is when my heart would like to think one thing and my head thinks another, but I definitely think my head is more right here in that this was probably negotiated back of the house that, Roger, you're going to take this one. I think it's probably ultimately what happened here. But we'll see, this is such a high wire act that, that any moment or any of these touch points, it's tenuous, right? Even if you acknowledge they're probably having that level of back of the house negotiation, doesn't mean that's not tense or could go, there's a lot of factors at play here about how this goes over the next, months and even next couple of years.
Well, yeah, I mean, because Dan has embarrassed the Shield, with this.
Yeah.
Again, I think he's just gotten caught, but he has embarrassed the Shield. The other owners already didn't respect him, as evidenced by the fact that Snyder has never been on any serious. He's never played any serious role in the governance of the league. He's not on any serious committees. He doesn't have any input. So I think that shows us that the other owners don't respect him. Now, the question of the day for Redskins fans, Washington fans out there, which isn't me anymore, but does this mean Snyder will leave if Roger does not bash him in public? I think what fans are missing here is that there is a formal way and an informal way to get rid of an owner. The formal way, to my knowledge, has never been used. Formal votes, like a jury voting on an execution, has never happened. What typically happens in these cases is that somebody goes to this owner and says, time is up. You need to go sell the team. Look at, like in basketball, Donald Sterling, Marge Schott with the Cincinnati Reds, Frank McCourt with the Dodgers. He didn't go quietly, but he went. So that is what typically happens. And so we'll know, I think, again, based on how much, we'll know what the NFL is currently feeling about that based on how far Roger goes.
Yeah, and I also wonder, at this point, he has tarnished the Shield many times over. It's like that horrible, dumb Calvin and Hobbes bumper sticker where you have Calvin peeing on something, you see every once in a while. That's Snyder to the Shield. So, the Shield has many layers of Snyder tarnish. What really is the thing that turns the screw is how much did he eventually start to cost the league money. And he probably hasn't really cost the league that much money yet. However, the Washington market is cratering so badly. And this is where, where is the stadium going to go? The constant fights with 3 municipalities, blah, blah, blah. The fact that you just got it's Washington, D.C., and this is, probably many of you know the area, from the area, still live in the area, et cetera, et cetera. That area, reconstituted as the DMV, is a much different place than it was even 20 years ago, where it was still a top market. So, the lost opportunity financially that is now just also part of this daily story, a different angle on it. I'm curious when he starts to lose the money. And if you look at, the Denver Broncos sale, which we talked about for a year, and now is a, fait accompli. It's the Walton kid, or heir, whatever you want to call him. And it was 4.5 or whatever it was?
I think it was more than, wasn't it more than that? 4.95?
4.7.
Yeah. Normally I would have this information, but because I'm on my phone today, I can't get it. So something.
So, that, as we've talked about this whole time, that set a new bar, and what Forbes considers the 10th most valued franchise in the NFL. So just like you watch a free agent wide receiver set a market, we just had the AJ Brown version of NFL valuations happen within the last couple of weeks. So you can start to figure out where these things slot, and it just starts to put into focus what the DMV area could mean financially for the league, and they just have someone who's pummeling it.
Now there's a good Sports Business Journal story on this, and forgive me, I don't have the name in front of me. But it goes into, but you can Google it and come up with that. You get a certain number free, every month. So anyway, I thought there was an interesting point in the story about the Broncos sale, which was that because it was a Walton, and Chris, is he a son? Is that what it is?
They always just say heir. So I'm having a hard time figuring out his familial status as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So one of the Waltons apparently has a net worth of around $60 billion. And what it said was that the other one, he outbid Forbes' valuation, did Walton. And two, apparently the fact that he was there kind of chilled the bidding a little bit, because the other owners were, knew that he could just outbid everybody, or prospective owners knew that he could just outbid everybody. And so, there's only a handful of people in the world who are worth this. Walton, Elon Musk, who I know Washington fans are always begging him to buy the Redskins. And there's a few others, but point is that world is even smaller. So I don't know if it's setting a new bar necessarily, more so than the Broncos. He kind of overbid for the Broncos just to get the team.
Yeah, but let's say sanity reigned. It's going to sound funny after the next thing I'll say, and it sold for 4.3, or 4. Let's just be even, Steven. It sold for 4. That's still a new bar. And that's still not an insignificant bar. And I think, by the way, it's Denver Broncos sale, Time to Pony Up, Sports Business Journal, Chris Smith, and Ben Fisher. It would still be setting a new bar. And I think if we could all wave our magic wand right now and Washington was up for sale, they'd be talking the guesstimates would be between 4.5 and 5.5. That would be the spectrum. And I think 4.5 would be insane. I think you're really talking between 5 and 6
for Washington.
Yeah.
I tend to agree with you, because the problems with the franchise, because on the one hand, you could say, well, Washington has no brand anymore, and the franchise is destroyed and all that. But if you think about why it's been destroyed, why there's no fan base, it's because of Dan Snyder directly and almost alone. And so if you get rid of him, a lot of that stuff gets better. The income stream has always been there, and it's always growing and all of that, because the NFL has revenue sharing. So yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you. It's one of the oldest teams in the league, 1932, all that. So I tend to agree with you. I think it would set another new bar dramatically higher than the Broncos.
What's really fascinating is, the economics of the NFL are so strong that's and this article actually goes into a little bit more in depth about this. It's like, you really, we've talked about this. You have to really fail hard to not, really cash in as an NFL owner, because of the media contracts, because of the revenue share, all that. That's all well established. So it's the extras, which is where these owners compete, right? Which is how you make extra or lose extra. So that baseline economics and the market it's in basically show you exactly what you could do here, and what you'd be earning and paying and all that. What I think you're talking about, Steve, directly, is that Snyder is the only problem with this franchise, and is such a problem that his exit would mint new fans at every level, all up to and including purchasing extra, season tickets. So all those extras, which is the owners fight for, compete for, those would flip to being a insanely depressed asset to a boon, right? Because just on that fact alone, and all those extras, in a place like Washington, D.C., the DMV, you're talking about just ginormous federal dollars, ginormous federal contractor ecosystem. The kind of money where they actually make directly outside of the boon of the NFL economics would be such an upside.
Yeah, because remember that the local ad revenue, well, most of that is kept. This is what Jerry Jones pioneered. So, a lot of the local sponsors that have gone, like Anheuser-Busch left, they got Crosswise with FedEx. All of that would be there, and I 100% think you're right. I wouldn't come back, but I think the vast majority of fans would come back. I think there would be a newfound excitement, all of that. So I totally agree with you. It makes me wonder, really, like, if the Steinbrenner sold the Yankees or Jerry Jones sold the Cowboys, what would the price be? You could only guess. 7 or 8 billion, for both, maybe. I don't know, but it would.
I
be
think you're
lot.
talking closer to 8 than 5. I think that's a safe statement.
Oh yeah, absolutely. because Washington's value isn't anything compared to those two teams. Or like the Lakers, maybe, and the Patriots would be way up there. The Giants, because it's in New York. So it's just kind of crazy how just insane the valuations have gone. Because didn't Snyder buy this team for, I want to say 800 million, maybe something like that. And 25 years later, my God, the value has gone up what is that? 600%, basically 700%. What kind of return on investment? How could you find that return on investment on any other asset?
Yeah. So, and the Sports Business Journal, the Denver Broncos sale time to pony up, does a good job of explaining here too, is the reason why we just had this sale price. And it's something that Steve and I have talked about on the history of the show, which was that a couple years ago, or recently, the NFL has changed some of their rules around how you can finance a team, and have even discussed even more radical rules. And all of this is to ultimately to be able to drive up these valuations, right? Because you allow these potential owners to have a, kind of a more risky bouquet of debt and less upfront ownership and yada, yada. But let's not forget, some of that was also ties back to Snyder, because they allowed him to raise his debt limit when he reconsolidated the ownership of his team. And so it's just you cannot escape Daniel Snyder in almost any elements of any NFL story that doesn't have to do with, play on the field, and then even a good amount of that as well. But, so you can see what the NFL has done to goose the system to go from David Tepper's 2.7 to Rob Walton's 4.7.
Yeah, in the Sports Business Journal article, it did make a point of saying that the debt limit had been increased. And just in case you all don't understand this, the reason why that is important is that the NFL reason why there is a debt ceiling is that the NFL does not want to be put in a position to where some horrible Snyder owner creators a team, and all of a sudden they've got creditors trying to foreclose on the team or its assets. The NFL wants to have it low enough to where that risk is minimized, and that the NFL can step in and buy the team out if necessary. That's why the NFL has it. And yeah, they keep every so often they keep increasing the debt limit, because these franchise valuations are so out of control that it's hard to even borrow or even find investors to come up with, non-Elon Musk, Bill Walton, not Bill, whatever his name was, Walton, guys with that much money anymore. This is why, by the way, if you think about, you see these people wish for former players to buy teams and all of that. And Peyton Manning ought to buy a team. None of them are even close to having the money necessary. Even if they're worth $200 or $300 million, it's not anywhere near the amount needed to buy a sports franchise anymore.
Although it does look like Peyton might get the next best thing here in this Denver deal, is he might be brought in as a top executive. So he might get all the fun without any of the risk, it looks like, by the end of all this stuff in Denver.
Yeah, of course. You got to use the word risk, facetiously a bit, because there is no risk in terms of financial investment. I've always said you and I could do it. We could put a child in as the owner, and the child would make money.
Yeah, like the old medieval regent kings with the
yes. The boy king could, who was the emperor in Egypt who was 12? The guy in the tomb. Anyway, yeah. You could. Yes, Tutankhamun. Thank you. Tutankhamun was really, really young. He was 12 or something when he became, when he stepped into power. And that type of person could run an NFL team and make money, because there's literally nothing to do.
So, enfant terrible young billionaires, if you want to own a team, Steve and I will be happy to be your conniving uncles.
That's right. We'll do it for you. Hire us. Allow us to retire and come run a sports team.
Yeah, we could. We'll hang in the shadows behind the throne and whisper advice.
Exactly.
So actually, that's a good transition, and we'll exit on this. Dan, take the buyout. That's my advice. We move on to a story that I find captivating, and it's just blown up in the last 24, 48 hours as we record the show on Saturday morning, and that is whatever is happening with the WWE and Vince McMahon. It looks
Holy
like
cow.
here's the basic facts. He has stepped away, but not relinquished control of running WWE. His daughter has stepped in as a temporary solution. It apparently is because the board of WWE is investigating a $3 million payout, plus I think an inflated salary for a woman on staff that he paid off through what, at least all accounting and reporting right now, was a consensual affair. So this is not an abuse situation. Could be workplace impropriety and illegal payments or whatever. But this was a consensual affair that the woman benefited financially with WWE funds, and so the board has sort of asked him to step aside. This all broke, I think, Thursday, Friday-ish. Wall Street Journal, I think, was the one that broke the story. Then he shows up on Friday Night SmackDown. And Steve, I don't think you've watched it. You can all find it on YouTube. It's been isolated already. And it's only, I think it's 2 minutes and 33 seconds or something like that. It is hysterical. He walks in. You've all seen the memes. Probably many of you know what he's doing. He does that exaggerated strut with his walk-in music, the whole nine, from just like all they do, all the way they have the theatrics set up. Strolls into the ring. He does something like, "Isn't this great to be together?" Shout out to Minnesota, which is where the SmackDown was being recorded that night. Of course, the TV cameras are picking up all the adulation. They pipe in crowd noise, obviously. The cameras, on all of the support. He does, we just have this one mantra, WWE. It says, now, then, future. And then he's like, the most important thing, together. Then he literally throws the mic across the stage, or the ring, same thing, and struts back off with his music and, exit stage left. If you don't think this whole thing isn't a bit, you're insane. You're insane. This is one of the greatest pro wrestling Vince McMahon theatrics of all time. This guy knows how to plug right into the nerve center of whatever crazy culture is happening. And I can hear it now. Oh, the kicker, Steve, so he stepped away from all the CEO, president, whatever. You want to guess what he's retained rights to in this right now, or control over?
I don't know. I mean, it's relevant to this fake scandal. Yep. I don't know. What was it?
The narrative of the WWE presentation. He still runs the story. This is It's so obviously a bit. He's like, how do we make? I can see them in the writers' room. How do we make me a Weinstein character? Because he's played the heel many times. So how do we make me a Weinstein character? And we'll make this giant, huge narrative. The press will be suckers and pick it up like another CEO fall from grace. It is brilliant.
Yeah, actually, that was the very first thing that went through my head when I read this story was that, this has to be a bit. It has to be a bit. There's no way it's not a bit. I mean, first of all, the legality of all this, if it isn't a bit, there's nothing criminal about a consensual affair. It may be against WWE policy. There's nothing wrong with a confidentiality agreement that basically says we'll pay you to be quiet. It's what Donald Trump did, during the presidential election season. Nothing's wrong with that. Now, using WWE funds might be a problem, but regardless. But yeah, I definitely think this is a bit. All of that stuff you just said, I think confirms it. I don't think if he was having a legitimate scandal, he would have come out and done all of what you just described, in Vince McMahon fashion. So yeah, it's if you're buying this, you're being hopelessly naive.
Yeah, and I have to say, I am hats off. And even listen, I'll even walk it this far. Did he have an affair with a staffer? Maybe, probably. Not that, did they pay them off? Yeah, probably. Is there probably some, by the way, he is the WWE, so whatever he's stealing from himself, it's all his money. I understand there's some kind of corporate structure and stuff, but this guy, I mean, he's got it locked down. So it's just using, his own money to do his own bidding. So even if some of those fundamentals are true, yes, even if some of these details are true, that still doesn't mean it's not a bit or their spin.
I mean, think for a minute about what he's done. He's taken an entertainment property, and for years he had people convinced that it was a real sport, and it's not. But he built it up from this like low-level regional thing that about 5 people cared about years and years, decades ago, and he's built it up into a major national property almost by himself, almost by just a sheer force of his own personality. Because he's done this like heel turn thing, strutting peacock routine for almost since the beginning, and people eat it up. So it's you could learn a thing or two about marketing from this guy. You really could. I'm not saying everybody needs to do what they're doing, but the things he's done to build up this property, I think, are very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is manufactured. And it's so funny because I kind of went into a few rabbit holes of, kind of pro wrestling commentary, and it's so funny. And you can see this in so many aspects of our current culture, but it's like people, they see 3/4 of what's in front of them and then miss the obvious thing,
Right.
And it's just like they're being yoked and they're talking about it like, and they're, there was a leaked quote from a wrestler that said this was the most disingenuous, so they're even establishing other wrestlers as being anti-Vince McMahon, which, by the way, they always do when they do the Vince McMahon as the heel bit. There's always like individual, because guess what wrestling is? It's beefs between two characters. That's literally drives the entire medium. So it's just so funny, this whole industry, and they probably, I'm sure, know it too. Some of them are in on the joke, but so many of them are like, they go right to the details of the scandal and they don't see the canvas, right? They don't actually see how the whole thing plays out.
Yeah, this happened several times in the past. What you're talking about the heel turn, there's been fake front office drama with the WWE before. Like you said, it appears as though they kind of suckered Sports Business Journal with this. Wasn't this out of Sports Business Journal?
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal. Okay. It appears as though they suckered real media on it. And it's like, how are you people so stupid to actually buy this? I don't get it.
Or even more cynical, they're actually totally smart at the Wall Street Journal, and which is
they're WWE. In on it themselves.
Yeah, they're just up the highway a little bit in Connecticut. In fact, if you drive from kind of the New York area up, kind of head northeast, it's so funny. You drive right by their corporate headquarters, and it's very branded. So I always chuckle every time I pass it. But and so you say, oh yeah, hi Vince. But they're all part of the same circle. So Wall Street Journal's probably get more hits and like I said, there's probably enough truth there, right? I'm sure I would be pretty secure an affair happened, so like there's just enough truth there to make it plausible. And so I wouldn't be, hey, Wall Street Journal, you want this story? You'll get, you'll kind of get in on our like 5 days of like headlines, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure, of course.
Notice the woman has not come forward.
Yeah, that's next week's SmackDown, Steve. That's next week's SmackDown.
Probably so. It's great. So, I mean, you have to be entertained by this nonsense.
Yeah, I'd urge all of you. Like I said, you can find it on YouTube in 2 seconds. It is hysterical. His walk in, and you're like, you're a little bit like, oh, Vince is getting a little bit old though. Maybe he doesn't have too many more of these in him.
Did the article say he was 76 years old? I think it was.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? First of all, like, how much Botox is this guy full of it, and steroids is this guy full of it, at this point? Because he's been involved in steroid scandals, like I think real steroid scandals, as is a significant part of the WWE. So like at this point, this guy is being like held together and kept upright with chemicals. But yeah, I think it's hilarious. And the real question is what's going to happen when he finally goes, either to retirement or, death. Is WWE able to keep up the facade as it is doing now? I don't know.
Well, he worked that daughter in, and she's been involved even publicly as a character as well for about 20 years. She's center narrative here. So, whether she succeeds or fails, I guess remains to be seen, but they've definitely done the setup.
Yeah, and that's Stephanie McMahon is who he's talking about. And she's been involved in all this for years too. Yeah. She's been almost more involved than he has at times. It sort of depends on the narrative. Anyway, yeah, I think you're right.
I don't want a new stepmom. You can just imagine that all playing out.
that could be probably. Probably. And the new stepmom will be like one of the female wrestlers or something,
I think I mentioned on the show a few times, but I spent most of the first half of 2022 making my way through this ginormous oral history of HBO written by James Andrew Miller. He did the ESPN book. He did a book on Saturday Night Live. This is kind of his beat. And there is some great Vince McMahon stuff in there. And it just shows you like how everyone was kind of in on it, So he had a pretty famous dust up on HBO with Bob Costas, and then they brought him, they bring him back for round 3, so, these are all sort of New York City media insider, half of this stuff is theater, even when you think it's more above board.
I can't imagine that the Wall Street Journalist is dumb. So yeah, you might be right that they're kind of in on it and they're just playing their role just because.
Yeah. So that was hysterical and funny. Hysterical and funny from maybe a little less cartoony way is whatever is happening in the world of professional golf, which is maybe seeing one of the great schisms, that we would see in professional sports. And these kind of sports like golf and tennis, boxing is probably like the granddaddy of this. They're so arcane in the different governance structures and how things operate that it's not as clean as something like the NFL or any kind of team-based sports league, which has to be more structured. So we're seeing basically, decide what league you want to be involved with, and one is got some problems, but. What we see, 17 golfers this week were suspended by the PGA because of their involvement in this new Saudi Arabian-backed golf league, the LIV. Do you know what that stands for? I guess I can look it up.
No, I don't. Well, while you're looking at that, go ahead.
No, go for it. I'm looking it up.
Now, first of all, it's not just 17 random golfers. It's some of the biggest names in golf. Dustin Johnson, Phil Mickelson, Rory McIlroy. There's serious big names. I think that if you want to give the PGA truth serum, it's really less about. I don't think they really care about Saudi Arabia very much. They may say they do, but I don't think that's really what it is. What it is that the LIV Tour is the USFL of golf. It's the first real competition the PGA has had since the inception of the PGA. Because like the Masters are run outside the PGA purview, but it's not a whole tour. This is a whole well-financed, hugely financed tour. And so I think that what's going on here is that they're using the Saudi Arabia investment part of this as an excuse, because nobody's ever said or bothered to research what kind of investment Saudi Arabia has. Is this 100% backed by the royal family? Is this just something that they have a small investment in, run by others? Nobody's ever really said. And lots of companies have compromised their integrity over a lot of things. So I think the presence of Saudi Arabia alone wouldn't make people blink normally if they thought they could make money on it. So I tend to think it's just the PGA trying to squash competition. Because in case you guys don't understand this, when like Tiger Woods goes overseas to play a lot and others do, they have to get permission from the PGA to do this because their contracts are exclusive contracts. And I just think this is a case of the PGA sees a well-financed competition and they're not going to help them. That's what I think is really happening here.
Yeah, and in fact, those rules, what the protocol and due diligence that one must follow to do a non-PGA golf event was what the PGA cited for these 17 suspensions, that those 17 golfers did not follow proper protocol in filing those paperwork requests and media releases for alternative PGA events. So that is literally the, statute in which they suspended those 17 golfers on.
Yeah, I mean, and the lawyer in me says it's not a statute, it's not a governmental rule, but yes, but yeah, that's the lawyer in me. I don't blame these golfers for doing it. I really don't, because what they've been offered are guaranteed contracts. Golf
200 million in terms of Phil Mickelson.
Yeah, humongous 9-figure guaranteed contracts. The PGA doesn't guarantee anything. It's like a eat what you kill sort of situation where you got to earn. You have to make cuts to make money. Everybody who makes a cut makes money, but it's nothing. There's no guarantee, and it's nothing like $200 million. So I don't blame them at all for doing it. What it makes me question is the viability of this live tour. Because I mean, they've got to make money somehow too, and I don't know how. I mean, it's going to be a loss leader certainly at the beginning, but I don't know how you get to the point where that works financially for the investors. That would mean it's a huge hit in the United States on TV, bigger than the PGA is now. So I don't know how. I tend to think that this is going to go away in a few years, and then Dustin Johnson and all the rest of them will come crawling back. That's what I think is the future for this.
So here we go. I'll give you a little details here. LIV Golf is a professional golf tour financed by the Public Investment Fund, the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. The name LIV is a reference to the Roman numeral for 54, the score if every hole on a par 72 course were birdied and the number of holes to be played at the LIV event. So it's a reference to a top score in a golf match.
But more importantly, though, then it is in fact completely financed by the Saudi Arabian government.
Yeah, what they call it, the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. So yeah, the royal family's money.
I mean, again, that makes it a little bit more problematic, but I don't think any corporation would ultimately have a problem with this if they could make money on it too. I think if the Saudi Arabian government had come to the PGA, I think you'd see the PGA in bed with the Saudi Arabian government. So I think this is less about human rights and far more about money.
Oh, 100%. I mean, anytime you deal with this much money and this much global connectivity, you're there are bad actors or whatever, so, and, whether you want to talk about the NBA in China or who other companies would get in bed with if they had the opportunity. I totally agree. If the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia came to the PGA and said, "Hey, we'd like to become a whatever double platinum sponsored partner with PGA, and we'll open up new, maybe this way we'll open up more international markets. Maybe we'll expand the ruling governances to make the sport even more international." The PGA would have said, "Yes, please."
Oh, absolutely. Just look at the NBA. I mean, we'll go back to the China scandal. I don't think it's worthwhile to detail the offenses of the government of China here, but most people already know that, and the NBA doesn't care at all. We did the Daryl Morey story a couple of years ago, and I mean, every player, LeBron James, all of them jumped to China's defense immediately. Why? Because they're making millions and millions of dollars off the Chinese government and the people of China. So that's exactly what would happen with the PGA had the Saudi Arabian, whatever fund it was, come to them, for sure. Nobody cares about human rights when there's hundreds of millions of dollars at risk.
Yeah, there's a reason why the U.S. government or other, European governments tiptoe around their public statements about China human rights or, any human rights violations, at countries as rich as China and Saudi Arabia because they have business deals, right? Like there's no way you can slice and dice this around any part of this where people aren't tiptoeing around these issues.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, every oil company in the, major oil company in the country does business in the Middle East, and they just have to kind of hold their nose and grin and bear it, because the only way they can make the money. So yeah, this is all about money, and don't be fooled. Don't
Yeah,
buy
it's just because
this
it's
nonsense about human rights.
just because it's golf or just because it's basically sport. These are things in the public sphere. The only reason why they get, the only real reason they get more, more attention is because there's already attention on these things by the nature of what they are. No, there's not a giant public out there following the intricacies of international oil contracts.
No, right, and the PGA ultimately is in the entertainment business, and entertainment is public and all that. Yeah, you're exactly right, because I think that at least a certain segment of society would be horrified if they knew how in bed these oil companies are with, some bad folks in the Middle East. And that's sort of what's happening. That's what the PGA is pretending that is happening with this live tour thing. So I really want to know, do they have TV contracts? Is it going to be on NBC? Is it just going to be in Europe? Are we never going to see Dustin Johnson ever again? I'm very curious as to see how it plays out and how well this live tour does.
In fact, the scenario that we've already sort of structured, which was this sort of like start at the Saudi Arabian fund / PGA, may be actually where we end up. Because if you siphon off, all this talent, then and people don't know who to watch, where, on what, then that starts to force that might just be the forcing function that gets the contract, that gets the whatever partnership that would allow players to play anywhere, whatever that might mean. This is probably the path to that.
Yeah, and then if that happens, you'll see this human rights narrative all of a sudden won't be a narrative.
Oh, right, yeah. We've investigated,
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. And the Saudi Arabian government has assured us that, all is well, and we've thought about it and we've investigated. That's what's going to happen. I think you're right. They would be wise. Sorry to interrupt, but they would be wise, I think, to figure out how to have a significant more presence in Europe and other countries. If from a financial standpoint, they'd be wise to do it. So, and maybe we'll see, as you suggested, a merger like AFL and NFC AFC style.
And we do know that there is a pretty, there's obviously an international market for golf, but I don't know if that market is, there's a demand. I don't know if there's a supply infrastructure ready to serve it with maximum financial profit efficiency. So there's a pretty probably, that's probably ultimately what's being thought about here.
Yeah. Oh, of course it is. Absolutely. Again, I just keep reiterating, it has nothing to do with, the political and all of that. It's all about the money. That's all it's about. It's just business, Chris.
Yeah, it's just business. And in 5 years, what probably will happen, regardless of sort of how this plays out, is, professional golf will look significantly different in 5 years, I would guess.
If this live tour makes it, if it doesn't, and this is just like another, minor league sport, football a league that's going to go away, then no. But because I'm concerned about where this money's coming from. We know where the money's coming from, the fund, but how they can make a profit on it, paying this much out, is another story. And it's got to be a tremendous success to work. So I really tend to think that the landscape won't be different, because I'm not sure this live tour will exist.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch. It's such an interesting point. And I love how you described it, the sort of eat what you kill, what currently constitutes how the PGA works. And there's no better example of that, and I'm not a big country club person, but, most country clubs in America have a quote unquote pro golfer on staff. And that really is that lowest rung of pro golfing ecosystem. They'll compete and you got to like kind of, you got to make the cut. You got to show enough places and that gets you access to, there's a whole way. And then those people are getting peanuts, right? And they're having to compete to make peanuts. And basically their side job is they get paid by these country clubs or to be the pro golfer, and they'll wheel them out. You can probably pay premium for lessons and things like that. But so if you have ever heard of what we have a pro golfer, whatever, that's because that's the lowest rung, and that's how they make up income when they can't make enough cuts or make enough off competing.
Yeah, most of those guys are not touring professionals. And the tour is kind of, I think the tour is a side job for most of those people. And yeah, it's kind of like being a Motor Trend certified mechanic, same kind of thing. Or is it Motor Trend? Don't hold me to that. But there are certifications for like auto mechanics. That's all that is, because most of these guys at your local country club are not going to be in the U.S. Open. They may play some tournaments and everything, but yeah, that is who they are.
So interesting stuff. But we should probably wrap it up today, Steve.
Okay.
Any previews of what's coming up in a couple of weeks on the network?
Sure. We're still in the midst of the position group breakdown series on the Hogstein, which we do a breakdown of the position groups one by one. Pretty good off-season topics. We have that. I would anticipate that Rick Snyder's show is going to be back around training camp. Again, he, as I always say, he takes a bit of a break in the off season. But there's that, and then we have all of our regular written content.
Well, there you go. Well, hopefully you all will be discussing the details of an upcoming Terry McLaurin contract.
That interests me more than the team itself.
Yeah. So there we go. That's my wish for your show. All right, Steve. We'll talk in 2 weeks.